If you have a question, raise your hand. The questions have not been so bad. When I've done these classes in the real world, questions have been a damn disaster, I'll be honest with you. Having now done this in the fourth or fifth class online, questions actually are not too bad. I don't know what it is. People are different here online. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. And as soon as I have a moment, and there's a good break, I will try to answer the question for you. Again, one of the important things with technology is everything builds on everything else. And so, right, if you get confused in the beginning, you can get lost really, really, really quickly. So anywho, this is CSS, cascading style sheets. Not exciting stuff, but it is very important. Again, one of the things a lot of new people ask me when they get into technology is they say, Eli, what language do I need to learn? And generally, the answer is a lot of them, right? Especially if you're going to be doing web app development. You're going to be creating your own version of Instagram or Facebook or a dog dating app. In order to make those programs work, you actually have a number of different languages going on. As I explained in the HTML class, basically, if you take a look at it and you're thinking about building a house, right? Let's say your web app metaphor, it's a house. Basically, if you take a look at this, when you think about the roof, when you think about the beams, when you think about the walls themselves, when you think about the foundation, that is all going to be written in HTML, hypertext markup language. This is what gives you P tags and H1 tags. This is what allows you to create tables, the whole nine yards, right? But it's pretty ugly, right? You can bold things. What can you do? You can bold, you can do italics, you can do that kind of stuff. You can't really do a lot with it. With HTML4, back in the day, there was something called HTML4. With HTML4, there was a little bit more formatting you could do, but nowadays you don't do it. So basically, you want to create the bones of your app, you're going to be doing that with HTML. Well, the thing is, if you want to start putting cool things in your app, windows, doors, you want to make it a color, you want to put some siding, you want to make it pretty, right? That is going to be done with CSS. So CSS is something called cascading style sheets. And so this is its own language that allows you to make the thing pretty, right? With your house, if you want some functionality inside, let's say you want a stove, or you want a washing machine or something like that, continuing this metaphor, that would all be done with JavaScript, right? Basically, if you press a button, if you click on something, JavaScript is the language that will do that. And then the pipes for plumbing, the pipes for electricity, that type of thing, that basically go back again to some big utility. That is the backend language that you're going to be using. So we're most likely in these classes going to be focused on Python, but that's only one of the backend languages. PHP, again, I still like PHP, even if everybody else gives me crap for it. Ruby on Rails, everybody should hate. Node.js, it's a fine language that's coded by people I generally don't like. But Node is a back-end language. But anyways, right? So if the water needs to get to your building, the power needs to get to your building, whatever else, one of those languages is going to be used. And then for things like, let's say, billing purposes, keeping your account information. Then you have something called a data store. Generally, one of the data stores that you're going to have is something called a database, most likely a relational database. And there you are going to use something called SQL, which is structured query language. And again, that'll keep records and all of that kind of stuff. We are going to have class on that when we have the class. And so, yeah, so when you say, how many languages do I need to know? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at the very minimum. And that is before you get to understanding how the operating system works and networking and DNS and a whole bunch of other stuff. But anyways, so today we are going to be focused on CSS. But I do want you to understand this. Again, this is, when we talk about this is what we call our tech stack. So if you go, when people are talking about their stacks, like a WAMP stack or a LAMP stack or all the new cool stacks that they have out there. Basically, this is the kind of thing that they're talking about. What technology is used to actually be able to make your product functional, right? So anyways, we're going to be doing CSS today, and it is basically its own pain in the ass language. Again, CSS, just so you know, when you get into CSS, this is all just configurations. This is all just configurations. Do not try to reinvent the wheel because it's just going to be a miserable experience and you're going to get a crappy wheel, right? Basically, when you do this, you type in, it's like if you want the font size to be a certain size, you type in font size colon whatever and make it the size. If you want it to be a color, you type it in and make it the color. If we go and we take a look, again, one of the sites that I've talked about a lot that you really should go to is called w3schools.com. And why am I not on the internet? I am on the internet. Uh-oh, well, because I did the wrong domain name. Go to w3schools.com if you have not been here. Go here, free advertising. They have lots of different languages here. You can go to CSS. You can click on CSS, and then they give you all of these options. Do you want borders? Do you want backgrounds? Do you want comments? Do you want fonts? Do you want icons? Do you want display? Do you want position? And basically all you do is you want borders, you click on this. It shows you some examples of how to do borders. And then it gives you a whole bunch of configurations. And then basically it tells you how to do all the different borders. And that is simply what you do. Again, that's one of the things that people get confused about, especially for the technology professionals that start doing this kind of thing, is most of the time we take what designers do and turn it into code, right? So a very well-paid profession is designers, especially in the modern world. And basically they will what's called wireframe, or they will design what the website is supposed to look like. They will design what the web app is supposed to look like with the colors and the position of the boxes and shadows and all that kind of stuff. And you take that very, very, very pretty document and then you just write a lot of ugly configurations to make your site look like that pretty document. So yeah, that's kind of how CSS goes. Let's see here. Makes your web app pretty and basically is used to format with HTML. I will tell you for any old school people here, and it is starting to be really damn old school at this point, HTML4. So there's HTML5 now, which is what everybody should use. There used to be something called HTML4. In HTML4, there is some ability to do formatting. It's 2024. Don't worry about it anymore. Don't do it that way. You should be doing everything with CSS. That hopefully doesn't mean anything to any of you, and that'll be a good thing. Talking about HTML4 and talking about HTML5, because basically with HTML5, so with HTML4, all these different technologies was very separate. Right? You had HTML, and then you kind of duct taped on CSS, and you sure as hell duct taped on JavaScript. And nobody's really sure whether they liked any of these technologies. We got some weird crap going on back in like 2004. This was just a disaster. Anyways, so that was the HTML4 timeframe when people were trying to figure out how this crap works. In the modern world, we figured out we like CSS, we like JavaScript, we like HTML. And so basically with HTML5, all of this has basically been really just brought together to be a much tighter package. When we talk about HTML5, there most likely will not be an HTML6. What do they call it? HTML5 is a living specification, which basically means that HTML5 will continuously be modified and updated. So theoretically, there will never be an HTML6, just simply because there's not supposed to be that version jump like there was between 4 and 5. One of the warnings that I will give you, especially when you start doing web app development, is everything that shows up on the screen, basically you type some very ugly code, and the web browser turns that into something pretty. Might come as a shock, but in the tech world, we can all be passive-aggressive asshats, and sometimes we do horrible things. And so one of the issues you get to is if you have Safari and you have Firefox and you have Chrome and you have Edge and you have versions of those browsers, Sometimes different browsers will show the exact same code slightly differently. So one of the things that I would recommend is if you're going to be doing web app development, find out what browsers your users are going to use and make sure you test your app on all of them to verify that they work properly, and also a couple of versions back, because sometimes people don't update things. That can run you into an issue. Okay, there we go. How to embed CSS, right? So we've had the HTML document before. You open with HTML, you open head, you close head, you open body, you close body, you close HTML, and in all of that, you put your HTML configurations. So basically, how do we add CSS to those HTML files? There's three ways to do it. There's something called an external style sheet, which is generally how you're going to be doing this on any kind of a large app. And basically what this is up in the head, like we talked about before, you can put a link, a reference link to a style.css or whatever you want to call it, .css file, and that will have all of your CSS configurations in there. So if you're going to have a 30-page website and you want all the pages in the website to have the exact same CSS, and you don't want to go through every document to modify it when you need to, basically you can have this one style sheet. Every one of those pages that opens, they will all reference that style sheet, and everything looks nice and pretty and good. You can have an internal style. So you may have seen this is basically, again, you do HTML, you open head. In the head tag, you'll actually open a style tag, and within the style tag, you put all your CSS configurations. So basically all the CSS configurations there, and that can be good for the one document that you're dealing with. So this is something that you might use. Oh, again, you're creating pretty basic web app, like a lot of the stuff that we're going to be doing. You might not want to deal with an additional CSS file. Everything is basically in this one script, in this one file. You can all dump it into the head, and that will work fine. And then the final thing, and we'll be actually using this a lot, is inline style. So when we create that P tag, when we create that H tag, table tag, whatever else, basically there we can do style equals, and then we can put in a whole bunch of CSS configurations. So what the color, what the background color is, what the text color is, what the text font size is, all of that kind of stuff can actually be put in that opening tag when you're doing it. And why this can be useful is basically if you look at precedence. So basically, initially, when you open your page, anything in the external style sheet, that's how it will be configured. But the internal styling, anything you have in the internal styling, that takes precedent over the external styling. So let's say you have one external page and you have the default configurations for the entire site. But again, everybody wants to be artistic. So they say, no, on my page, I want it to be different. Well, what they can do is basically you can bring in that external sheet. All the stuff in there will be how it is. Anything that you change on the internal sheet, basically you want the font to be different, the color to be different, something like that, that will take precedence over that external sheet. And then you have the inline, and the inline takes precedence over everything else. And one of the reasons we're going to be doing a lot of inline stuff is simply to make life easier for, again, when we want to change colors in dashboards, right? If this website is up, we want it to be green. If this website is down, we want it to be red. We can just do a very simple if-else statement. If this, color green, else color red. And then basically we can do an F string. So when we print that onto the screen with the inline, we can do style equals background color colon and the value for the variable. If we take a look at this, we go to css.html. Which is here. And yeah, so this is basically what this is going to look like. So I've stripped out a lot of the HTML5 coding that we did before because I'm trying to simplify this. Again, one of the things being a teacher gets into be a real pain in the butt, like how you teach people. Again, that's a great question. Trying to figure it out. Anyways, one of the things I try to do is try to simplify everything to the point that it's easy to understand. You can hyper focus on whatever it is we're talking about today. And so one of the things you'll notice with this is we don't have the HTML tags, we don't have the head tag, and we don't have the body tag. right? So, and the doc type tag. So if you're putting this into a production environment and your boss is going to be looking at it, make sure to put in the doc type, make sure to do the HTML, make sure to do the head, and make sure to do the body, because that's the proper way to do it. Here's the thing, the technical specification for HTML5 does not require that you do those types of things. And so I strip it out just so we can focus on what I'm trying to focus on today, if that makes sense. So with this, we have an external style sheet. So basically this would either be in the head or at the top. Again, HTML5, you can just put this at the top. And for an external style sheet, what you do is you say link rel equals style sheet. So basically we're saying, what is this thing that we're linking to? Ref and style.css. So the style.css file is in the folder that this thing is, so we don't have to do a path here. And basically with this, if I go over to style.css, this is what the style.css looks like. So we're going to talk about this more, but just the idea is the H1 tag. For an H1 tag, we want the color to be green. We want the font size to be 100 pixels. Again, and this is where I'm talking about configurations. Again, this is boring as dirt. This isn't fancy stuff. It's like literally, how do I make it this color? All right. Anyways, this is something called a class. We're going to talk about class, but with this .etcg, so anything with the class of .etcg, we're going to make the background color of it orange. Then paragraph, a paragraph tag with a class of etcg will be the font size of 30 pixels. So this is basically what that external sheet looks like, and this is basically the code that you're going to be looking at for all of this stuff. So that's with the external style sheet. Then we have the internal style sheet. So the internal style sheet, we open up style and we close style. So we're telling HTML5 that we are going to be giving you CSS information. So it needs to know what it is. So here we're going to do a P tag, so a paragraph tag. We're going to say for paragraph tags, background color equals blue, right? That's all we're going to do. Here, we're again going to do a comment. Here, we're going to do a comment. Now, again, one of the big pains in the buttocks is, whenever you're dealing with coding, is every coding language has to do things their own way. So with like with Python, if you want to do a comment, you do hashtags. In HTML, like again, HTML, right? If you want to do a comment, you do the arrow, and you do exclamation point, hyphen, 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 comment, hyphen, hyphen, arrow on the other side. That's how you comment in HTML. Now, you would think if you're going to have all the crap on the same page, the simplest thing you could do is use the exact same syntax, the words, for a comment, but that is not the case. If you want to put a comment in your CSS, this is what it looks like. So you have the backslash with a star, whatever your comment is, star, backslash, and you put your comment in between that. But that is only for CSS. As I'll show you in a second, if you put that outside your style tags, it'll actually show up on the screen. And again, this is the big problem. The big frustration with learning how to code to begin with is, again, there's all this syntax. The words, like, you know what to do. I want to do a loop. I want to do an if-else statement. Like, you know what you want to do, but each of the languages just have their own particular ways of doing things. Anyways, then we're actually going to show this on the screen. So it's css.html. H1 will be my app. So H1 will be green, and it'll be 100 pixels in size. P, so the P tag, hello world. So with the P tags here, basically the color will be blue in the background. And then P, style equals color, aqua, more text. So basically with this, this is how you can do inline CSS. And so in this is actually going to be that aqua color. If we go over and we take a look at this, we can go to css.html, and so this is what we're looking at here. Okay, so my app is 100 pixels. I'm just making this bigger for you guys, and it's green. Then here, so for the P tag background, so in, where did we do this? Okay, so here. So we say P style, so P style background color equals blue. So that comes out to being blue. But then here for inline, we say we want the text color to be aqua. And so that's where here we do P color is aqua. So background color is the background color. Color is the actual text color. And so this is a basic idea of how CSS starts to look for you. And this is essentially what we're going to be fleshing out today. And so with this class today, just something to keep in mind. Again, there's just a tremendous number of configurations with CSS. You could write books and books and books about CSS. What I'm going to be doing today is giving you an overview of how all of this works, basically so that you can go to W3 Schools or ChatGPT. ChatGPT is great for coding, to basically ask it how to do what you want it to do. I have an image where when I hover over, I want this to happen. Tell that to ChatGPT and it'll spit out some beautiful configurations for you. Why is that there? Da-da-da. Okay, how to embed. When we look at the basic formatting, basically what you're going to do is you're going to do a tag, then you're going to do a squiggly bracket. You're going to say what the property is, a colon, what the value for that property is, and then semicolon is what separates everything. So you have the name of the property, colon, the value of the property, semicolon, and then basically if you want to do multiple, you just keep that going down a line. So property one, value one, semicolon, property one, property two, colon, value two, semicolon, property three, blah, blah, blah. And so you can build these up. You're gonna have 50 different properties in your CSS if you want it to be. So basically you're gonna do like here, when we do the let me do hold on one second. Let me just put that over there, so that makes more sense. So we take a look at the style sheet again. So H1 tag. So with this, this is where you can put in any of the tags. So H1 tag, H2 tag, H3 tag, TH, TD, table, LI, OL, any of the tags. Basically, you can put, so whenever the tag is there. And so when you're doing this in the style sheet itself, you put in this formatting. So you do squiggle bracket, and then you put the property, colon, the value, semicolon. Property, colon, the value, semicolon, and then you close everything. And that's basically the idea of how you're going to be writing all of this stuff out. Let's see here. Again, with the comments, the comment thing is weird. The comment thing is weird. And I'll just show you how this works. So if I take this, I copy this, right? Do that. So if we go and take a look at css.html right now. So css.html, if we look at the page source, we can see that the comment is there. So in the style, this comment exists, but it's a comment, so it does not show up on the screen. If I do Control S, so I save, and I refresh, now you can see that the comment shows up because you try to put this comment within the HTML section, and the HTML does not view this as legitimate code, so it puts it up on the screen. And so, again, this is one of those, I don't know how much you're going to put comments into your CSS or HTML, but this is an important thing to understand with all these different programming languages, how you can run into just weird syntax issues sometimes. Okay, let's see here. There we go. So classes. So we have the tags. H1, H2, P, table, TD, TH, any of the normal tags. And then you can format it. But then you can have classes. And so this is going to be important, especially when you have web applications and you want everything to look very similar. Right, so let's say you have the web application, and whether it's an H1 or whether it's a P or whether it's whatever else, you want the font to be a specific color, right? So HTML by default is just going to be black. You're doing this fancy stuff with your website, so you say, I want all of the text color to be a particular shade of brown. Well, what you can do is basically you can use a class. So you can create what's called a class, and then you can assign that class value to every tag that you care about, and then it will show up basically how you want it to with all of that additional formatting. The nice part about this, again, especially if you have a style sheet, is you can go to that one single style sheet. You can go to that one class in the style sheet. You can make some modifications, and that modification will go out to everything, all the elements that you've created on all of your different pages. In order to create a class, basically, you do period, and then whatever your class name is. So period, and we'll show you this, animate, or period, whatever else, and that'll be the name that you will use to call it. You can also use class names for specific tags. So let's say with certain, let's say divs. So div is going to be a big thing in the CSS world. You can create a div. You can call a particular class name, and then anything, then it'll go to div dot that class name, and any of the values there it will assign to that particular div. We can go ahead and look at class HTML again. That's where we can take a look here, and again, so .etcg background hyphen color is orange. P.etcg font size is 30 pixels. So what I can do is I can come here, and what I can do is I can say class equals etcg. And so this is all we do to call that particular class. So we simply say class, that's what it's called, equals, and then either double quotation marks or single quotation marks. We're generally going to be using double in this class because we're going to be dynamically writing with Python. Python has to be within either double or single. And so basically with Python, we generally use single quotation marks, and then HTML, CSS, we use double quotation marks so we don't run into problems. So anyways, class equals etcg. And now if I Command S, and we go here, we can now see that it now has an orange background. Again, as I said before, with precedence, I can go to this hello world. I can also say class equals etcg, and with that, it will be font size 32. So Control S. See how this works. There we go. So again, as we go in order, you have the external style sheet, the internal style sheet, and then whatever the local is. So since the internal style sheet is overriding, how am I doing this? Sometimes we get confused. Huh. Well then, that might be an oopsie on my part. Anyways, we're just going to keep going. So anyways, the external here is overriding the internal. Why is that happening? Anyways, just to show you how it works. So we have this class, style. So etcg, background color is orange. Since it's also p.etcg, the font size is going to be 30 pixels. And so we now have 30 pixels, and it's orange. And I have to go do a little bit of reading after this class. If you think I am perfect, that is incorrect. So this is the basic idea of classes. So the tag is H1. You do the tag here. If you want to do a class, it's period, whatever the tag name is. Basically, when you're writing this out, am I losing my mind sometimes? I swear I'm losing my mind. Oh, shit. Anyways, I think you followed along. Sorry, it's been a long day. Hopefully you understand classes. Feel free to raise your hand if you don't understand. Anyways, okay, now we get to divs. So divs, basically, when we're building our web page, one of the big questions is how to do formatting, right? So we got the colors. We got the color. If you want the font size, you want the background color, you want the font color, we kind of understand that. But one of the big things with CSS is that you're going to be designing your page. And so one of the parts with that is you have to figure out essentially how to divide your page up. Let's say if you go to a lot of websites, let's say they use WordPress, if you're taking a look at the overall web page, right? You got your web page here. Basically, what you use is divs. So let's say you want a header. Right, so let's say we want a header that says Silicon Dojo, right? This is going to be a div. So we're going to use a div tag, and basically we're going to put that picture within the div tag. Now let's say we want columns, right? So we want, let's say, 3 columns. And in these 3 columns, let's say we want the services the Silicon Dojo has to offer. We can do classes here. We can do, let's say, consulting here. And we can do, I don't know, something here, something that brings me money here. So all of these are going to be divs. These are all going to be divs. But to make sure that they show up on the screen properly, we are then actually going to put them inside a div. So you're going to have one container div that will then have these internal divs that again will be these basic sections. Where this stuff starts to get really confusing, and again, that's why you kind of have to jot this out and ask ChatGPT every once in a while, is let's say within these divs, what if you want little boxes in here to show something? You may then use divs in there too. So you have a div within a div that has 2 other divs that's inside another div. And that's basically how you're going to start designing your site. And with the divs, you can do radiuses, you can make the sides of the div, semicircular, that kind of thing. We're going to talk about shapes in a second. You can actually use divs to create shapes. You can do all kinds of weird stuff with divs, but basically divs are going to be how you're going to be basically designing the site. Again, you have nested divs. Then you're going to display. So there is a property called display, and that's going to be a fun thing for you to deal with. So one of the things is when you initially create a div, they will all be on their own line. So you create one div here, and they basically, it's as if there's a break in between them. And so if you want them to be in line, you actually have to do a display called inline value, and then that is what will put them into line. If you want what's called a responsive website, so what a responsive website is when you take a look at a website and it changes as you change the size of the screen. If you want this to work properly, you'll probably have to use something like inline flexbox. Anyways, and that is what will get all of these things to line up how you want them to. And so that's going to be a big thing as you design your site or your web application. Is one of the things you're going to have to think about in the beginning is basically, again, how do you want this to look? And then how are you going to literally write all of this different code? With the height and the width, so obviously height and width values, you can either do pixels, so you can say how many pixels wide or high you want it to be, or you can do percentage. So basically what percentage of the screen do you want it to be? And you can also do autofill. So like a lot of times, especially with images, you'll say, I want the image to be 200 pixels high with an auto width. Right, so if you're not sure how wide the image is, but you want everything to be 200 pixels tall, you'll say, okay, I want all the images to show up. They'll be 200 pixels tall with a width of auto, and then it will simply make sure that you keep the ratio, the height width ratio, proper. We can take a look at the div.html, and this is what we're looking at here. So with this, basically, I just did a style at the top. So this is an internal style sheet, and I created a for the div. So we're going to say border color is black. We can do border width is 5 pixels. Border style is solid, and then display is inline block. Then we do div.container, so the overall container. Display equals flex. Flexbox basically means it can stretch. Justify content to space around. Align item center. Basically, it's going to try to center the items. The height for that div container is going to be 300 pixels, and the width is going to be auto. We're then going to have the div box, so the internal boxes. We're going to want the height for those to be 200 pixels. We're going to have the width to be 200 pixels. Yeah. So just to show you, I'll pull this up on the screen in a second. We're going to create our first div here, just to show you how it looks. So div style is going to be height by 200 pixels, the width of 200 pixels. So here we're doing inline styling. So this is the size that it's going to be, but it will also inherit up here. So it'll inherit a border that'll be 5 pixels solid, and it will be black. So we should just get a nice black box with a black border. Then we're going to come down here. We're going to create a div. The class is going to be container. So it's going to have a black border, like we said before. But in the container, if we take a look at it, everything inside is basically going to be centered. The height is going to be 300 pixels, and the width is going to be auto. Then we come down here, and again, this is where we have the internal boxes. So we have div class equals box, div class equals box, div class equals box, all of these boxes. Then if we look here, div class of box, height of 200 pixels, width of 200 pixels. If we then go over and we take a look at this, div.html, this is then what we get. And this is where we start talking about how everything is going to get laid out. So that first div box is up here. Again, so it's 200 pixels or whatever, but 200 pixels. We have a 5 pixel black border, and that's what that looks like if we just call. So we created the style for a div with basically the black box, the black border, and then we defined it as 200 pixels by 200 pixels. Here, we then have the container, right? So we created the container, so it's 300 pixels tall, 100% of the width, as you can see. And then everything that's inside the center, inside the container is basically going to be centered and justified. And then we have these 3 boxes that we created, and they are now here so that we can see them. And so this starts to show you the basic idea of how you use divs in order to start actually designing what your site is going to look like. So I can go here and I can say, oh, cool classes I offer, consulting I do, other cool stuff. Again, just very, very basic here. And then if I do this, if you can see that, right? So basically in this box, cool classes I offer, consulting I do, other stuff. And so I would then use CSS to format this, CSS and H tags and all that kind of thing to try to then, flush that out so that it makes more sense to the people that are looking at it. And so this is the basic idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about div boxes or divs. Let's see here. Yep. Past that, we then have images. Images are actually really cool. With CSS, there's a lot of pretty things that you can do with pictures. You can actually change the opacity. You can put filters on your images. Plus, you can do a lot of other things. So a lot of times people think like you have to use, Adobe, Photoshop, something like that in order to modify images. One of the cool things is actually built into your browser is the ability to do some of this stuff. So we take a look at pictures.html. We have some different CSS styling here. So again, this is on page internal styling. For the image tag, so the IMG. So whenever we call an image in HTML, it's going to be IMG space SRC equals whatever the picture name is. We're going to say we want the picture to always be 200 pixels. So it's going to be 200 pixels. And then for width, we're going to make it auto. So it's just going to be however big it is. Because remember, if we define the height and we define the width, then there isn't not going to be any ratio. It's just going to be exactly how you tell it. So if it's stretched, it'll be stretched, and if it's squeezed up, it'll be squeezed up. So that's why you do the auto. For the images, again, for display, we're going to do inline block. And so what inline block is going to do is it's going to make them all inline. Then we're going to do img dot opacity. So opacity is the opaqueness of the image. So basically, can you see through the image, right? We're going to put that at 0.5. We're going to do an image blur, so img.blur. You can do a filter. You can do a blur of 4 pixels. So again, you can go and take a look at this, what the configurations are, but basically it's going to blur the image a little bit. We can do grayscale, filter grayscale. We're going to do 100%, so we're going to make it totally grayscale. And we're going to invert, and inverts, I don't know, it's inverted. The colors are swapped out or whatever, makes it really trippy or whatever else. And so the interesting thing here is basically we're going to be using the one image. So the image that we have a puppy image of Roxy. We're going to use this one image, and simply using CSS, it will present differently. So we're not saving the file, we're not modifying the file, we're not doing that. We're simply using these filters to change how the person sees it. We take a look at this. Again, how you call images. img src equals puppy.png. So puppy.png is in the same folder, so that's how we call it. img class opacity, same puppy picture. img class blur, same puppy. Class grayscale, same puppy. Class invert, same puppy. So one of the big things to think about here is this is the exact same image file. If we go over, again, I have a puppy picture here. So if I double click on the puppy picture, we are going to see the puppy picture. So that is a beautiful picture right there. So we're going to use Roxy's face in order to futz around with it using CSS. If we then go to pictures.html, this is what we're going to get, right? So this is the original image. So we put the image there, didn't do anything to it, and we get the image. It is as it is. It's 200 pixels by 200 pixels. I, of course, am zooming in, so it's a different size. Then this is opacity. So at 0.5 opacity, it's half opaque, I suppose. So you can sort of see through it. And so again, if you're thinking about for like design purposes or whatever else, maybe that's a little too harsh for your design, and having this opacity might be nice. The other thing to remember with these things, like with opacity, is that we're going to talk about this in a couple of minutes, but you can do on hover or on active. So when you hover your mouse, your pointer over an element, you can have something occur. So you could have this image, and then when you hover over it, the opacity will go down, and maybe you can see something underneath. That's one of the little tricks you can use. Then we have blur. I don't know if you just want to screw with people. I know what's coming, and it kind of makes me want to vomit. So anyways, you can do the blur thing. I don't know. Again, it's design. I'm a geek, not a designer. Grayscale. So again, with this, you get very nice, pretty grayscale. And then down here, you get invert. And so that inverts the colors. And so these are some of the basic things that you can do with images. Again, you're not modifying the image in any way, shape, or form. And so you can do this kind of stuff with the design process to make it look however it's supposed to look. And this is also, as I talked about before, this is the idea of a responsive web design. So the idea with the responsive web design is when you have the full screen, when all these images can fit on the full screen, then they basically should all be in line. And then as I basically shrink the screen, then you see how they start merging and start, right? That's one of the things with responsive web design and something to consider as you're building your sites. Let's see here. Shapes. Shapes are a pain in the butt. Ask ChatGPT. Again, ChatGPT is not artificial intelligence. It's still incredibly, incredibly useful. It is amazingly useful for coding. I have found no other use for ChatGPT in the rest of my entire life. Coding, it is phenomenal. And so an important thing to understand with CSS is you can use CSS to create shapes. You can use CSS to create very complicated shapes. But again, it's all through those configurations. Left by so many pixels, up by so many pixels, margin of so many pixels, right? Basically, when you create the shapes, you're going to be creating a shape using the divs. So those div boxes that I talked about here, basically you are going to be modifying those div boxes in order to create whatever shape you're trying to create. We go over, take a look at shapes.html. Shapes. Okay, so this we have internal styling to basically give you an idea of how this looks. So we have a style. Again, we open style, we close style down here. We're going to create some default values for the divs. So anything that's a div, this is going to be a default value. Background color is going to equal red. So all of our shapes will have a red background color unless we modify. Display inline block. So inline block means they will then be in line, so they don't go from one to the next to the next. Then we come down here and we create the value for square. So either a square or a rectangle. All squares are rectangles. Not all rectangles are squares. So basically, whether you're going to do a square or a rectangle, all it is right. So we do a height of 300 pixels, and we do a width of 300 pixels, and that'll give us a square. If we want to do a rectangle, you do a height of 300 pixels and a width of 500 pixels, and that gives you a rectangle. I figure you guys can follow along with that. Then we have rounded. So you can do rounded edges. So again, this is one of those things to be thinking about, like with design and images. Do you want sharp corners or whatever else? So you can do a rounded edge, height 300, width 300, whatever you want it to be. Then you have what's called the border radius. So the border radius is the radius for the edge for the corners, basically. This is how you kind of curve them off. I don't know. Anyways, if you do a 25% border radius, you'll get a nice soft corner. If you want to step it up and you want a circle, again, you do 300 pixels by 300 pixels. You do a border radius of 50%. And when you do a border radius of 50%, you will end up having a circle. If you want an oval is simply a circular rectangle. So height of 300 pixels, width of 600 pixels. So the width or the height is longer than the other one. That's what gives you an oval. You still do a border radius of 50%, and that will then give you an oval. Then you get triangles. I'm going to show you how this works. And then you can ask ChatGPT. Oh, this is one of those things that might melt your brain. So you start with a triangle. You say width is 0 and height is 0. What? Then you go into this whole thing of, so border bottom is going to be 300 pixels. So with this, it's kind of going to be a triangle that points up. So you're going to say border bottom is 300 pixels. So it'll be 300 pixels on the bottom. Then you say border left. So from the left at the top, it's going to go into 150 pixels. And from the right, it's going to go in 150 pixels. And so that will give you a triangle. Now we're going to do solid white. Basically, those covers up the edges. And then we're going to do blue for the middle bit. That's going to give you a triangle. If we go down here and we actually call it, again, div class square, div class rounded, div class circle, div class oval, div class triangle. And so when I double click on this, where are my shapes? This is what we're going to get. So square, pretty simple. Rounded edges, pretty simple. Circle, pretty simple. Oval, pretty simple. And then you got a triangle. And triangles blue. Ask ChatGPT. Just to show you that the configurations really do something. And if I do this, so I do border top. So the top will be 300 pixels. Um, then I do Control S to save that. And now we can see that the arrow points down. Um, and I just do not have the brain power to fully explain triangles to you because it's just configurations. It's just configurations. And then one of the things to be thinking about too, again, with these shapes, is again, you can make them very complicated. So you could add a square to the top or bottom of a triangle to make it an arrow, right? You could add circles and an oval inside this circle to make it a happy face. Um, Basically, with all that kind of stuff, you just sit there. Really, you ask ChatGPT, ChatGPT, how do I create happy face with CSS? Well, it gives it to you. Why do you do that kind of thing? So one of the questions that might come up, like, what? Look, if I can just get a JPEG, right? You just get a JPEG and dump that thing in there. Just do an IMG SRC, dump the exact picture that I want. Why would I want to start creating shapes or things with CSS? One of the big things to be thinking about, again, with any kind of systems that you're going to be dealing with is resource consumption. When you're processing videos, you use a lot of CPU, other things use a lot of RAM, other things use a lot of storage. When you're building web apps, you're going to be using a lot of network resources, right? So when you send a picture, when you actually send a JPEG or a GIF or whatever else to the client, that requires a significant amount of network resources to do that. Things to be thinking about is if your clients don't have good internet access, that means the performance of your web app isn't going to be so good. And also, the more people that use your platform, that's the more bandwidth that you're going to require. That's going to increase the cost. One of the cool things is when you're doing this kind of shape or whatever with CSS is basically all you're sending to the client is some configurations. So even the most brutally complicated CSS configuration is still going to be a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a JPEG file as far as size is concerned. And so that's one of the things to consider is when you're building out your web app and thinking about the users and resource consumption and all that kind of stuff. That's one of the reasons that you might want to deal with shapes there. Plus, you get the prettiness factor if you're just using them for simple things. Let's see here. Selectors. So selectors, as I talked about before, one of the interesting things. So back in the day when we talked about HTML4, with HTML4, any interactivity you wanted to do at all was all done with a JavaScript. So if you wanted a drop-down menu, if you wanted to hover over something, that type of thing, that all had to be done with JavaScript. And one of the cool things with HTML5 is you actually do get some functionality, interactivity with CSS now. So basically you can do on an active. So what active means is when I click on an element, and that element could be anything. I could click on an image, I could click on a piece of text, I could click on a div. Basically, how will the CSS be modified when I click on something, or basically on hover, right? So we go over, we take a look at selector, and this is how it is. Pretty simple. Okay, so with this, again, internal style sheet, the div itself. So the div, we're going to make the height 300 pixels. We're going to make the width 300 pixels. And by default, the background color is going to be yellow. So for the element, so we're going to say div colon hover, div colon hover. So on a div, if you're going to be hovering over it, you do a background color of red. So you simply put your arrow over it, it should turn red. If I click on the mouse, so div colon active, we're going to make the color purple. And so again, with any of these properties, so this is where we talked about opacity before. So if I hover over a div, you could make the opacity 0 so you could see what's underneath if you want to do that kind of thing, right? You can do something where You can have divs within divs. So when you hover over, one div becomes opaque and the other can be seen. So like you could have an image. So I could have an image. And when somebody's like, oh, what is that image? They could hover over the image and then that image disappears and you have the description underneath. That's the kind of thing that you could do. Anyways, with this, I just have the div under here. So we're just going to have one single div, 300 by 300. We go and we do the selector. So this, right? So we got 300 by 300. It is yellow when we're not doing anything to it. I'm simply hovering over it. Simply hover. That's it. Now it's red. When I click, now it becomes purple. So as I am interacting with this particular HTML element, the CSS is changing based off of what I do. And so again, this can become much, much, much more complicated. I just want to give you the idea of that functionality is there. Oh, let's see here. And then we have animation. Again, one of the interesting things with CSS is it has a lot of functionality in there. Whether or not this is how you want to do the functionality. The benefit of CSS is very low, exceedingly low resource consumption. The pain in the ass of CSS is that CSS can be a bit of a pain in the ass. So, you know, if a file is 20 times the size or 500 times the size, but you can actually create the animation in like 5 minutes, that might be worth it for your organization. Anyways, when you're doing CSS animation, basically you're going to have keyframes. With keyframes, basically what we're going to be saying is how are the CSS characteristics going to be changing? So you can either do from to, so it starts here and it goes to here. So it starts, let's say the background color starts yellow and it goes to purple. And so as the animation runs, it'll go from yellow to purple. Or you can do a percentage. So you can say at 10%, like one of the things we're going to do here is we're going to basically have a ball bounce. So we can say at the 10% mark, I want the pixel distance to be here. At the 50% mark, I want it to be here. At the 75% mark, I want it to be here. So you need to do by percentage of the animation or just simply from to. You have the animation name, you have the animation duration, and you have the animation iteration count. Everything has to be configured right in order to make this work. You go over, take a look at the animation.html. This is what we have. So we have the div box, as we had before, height 300, width 300, background color is going to be gray. That's how we're going to be starting out. So the first animation is going to be a color animation. So with that div box, that starts out as gray. This is how we define the animation. So we say at keyframes, and then we give it a name. So this name here can be basically whatever the hell you want to call it. We're going to call it color because that's what we're doing. We're going to say at the 0% of the time mark, we want the background color to be red. At the 25% mark, we want the background color to be yellow. At the 50% mark, we want the background color to be blue. And at 100%, we want it to be green. So basically, we're just going to make this colorful. And so again, that's kind of like one of the cool things. Again, like I think about this with colors. You know, if you have a client that's all about pride, like imagine if banners are changing between all of the colors, and you can simply have this animation go on a loop, and people think it's kind of cool. All right, why have a static rainbow when you can have a dynamic rainbow? Anyways, let's see here. Then we come down to the div itself. So these are the keyframes, right? Then we come down to the div itself. So we're going to create div with a class of color, right? So basically, we're going to div, give a class of color. The animation name. So we point the animation name here to this keyframes that we called it up here. Then we give it the animation duration. So when we do 0, 25, 50%, we're not giving the timing here. We actually put the timing here. And so we say we want this whole animation to run in 4 seconds. So that's one of the cool things here. Again, so you can have the exact same animation. In certain places, it can be running in 4 seconds. In other places, it can be running in 40 seconds. Right? Anyways, and then down here, you can say the iteration count. So how many times do you want this thing to iterate? Do you want it to go through and then stop? Do you want it to constantly go through? Anyway, so we're going to say infinite. So you either put a number, an actual number here, an int here, or you say infinite. Then we're going to do a move. So at keyframes move. So what we're going to do here is we're basically going to be moving as a box. We're going to have a bouncing box. We're going to say we want to be at the 0%. We want the left-hand side to be at pixels. At the 25% mark, we want it to be 100 pixels away from the left-hand side. At the 50% mark, we want it to be 400 pixels away. And then at the 100% mark, we want it to be 800 pixels away. Same thing, position. Okay, for this, I have to put the position relative. So since it's moving, we have to say that the position is actually moving with it. So position is relative, animation name is move, animation duration is 4 seconds, and the count is infinite. When we actually go to call these, it's pretty simple. Div class color, close div. Break, so there's a little space in between. Div class move. And so one of these divs is going to be going through colors, the other is going to be moving. If we then go over to the animation.html, we now see this, and this is now all being done with CSS. So this thing up here is it's just going through those colors, changing the colors, and this here is actually moving, right? So again, this can be really interesting. Oh, if you want to be creating things like dynamic graphs or whatever, again, you can have it iterate once. You can have it just do it once. So imagine if somebody goes to like a dashboard page and then all of your metrics kind of grow to whatever location they're supposed to be to. That's kind of like an animation that you can do with this kind of thing. You can do this. Again, you can make this very complicated. You could have 500 boxes doing all kinds of wacky ass things. Really, it's kind of the imagination is about the limit. And again, why you would do this with CSS is again, you're just literally sending a little bit of ASCII text. That's it. If you want to do more things complicated, again, have I told you about ChatGPT? Again, all of this stuff, that's what you have to remember with CSS. All it is configurations. As with most stuff in technology, if you do the configurations properly, it'll work. And if you don't, it won't. So that's it. Okay, that is the basic class on CSS, right? So told you what CSS is, told you how to embed CSS, we told you the basic formatting of CSS, we've told you classes for CSS, we told you about the divs, we talked about images, we talked about shapes, we talked about selectors, we've talked about animation, and so here are now our labs. So we got 3 labs. We have a visual lab, we have a report lab, and we are going to build a dynamic site. So where is this? Okay. Visual lab. So basically the idea with a visual lab is, sometimes you need to visualize things, or sometimes the users need to visualize things. So seeing things in a visual perspective, you get the point. Anyways, so we have the idea here of what if we wanted to visualize GDP of certain countries. And to be clear with these numbers, I'm pulling them out of my butt. I have no idea what the GDP of these countries are. They're just numbers. Anyways, so imagine with this. So we have a dictionary here, right? This is a dictionary. Basically, it looks like a named key array in other programming languages. Basically, we have the name of the index and we have a value, name of the index value, name of the index value, name of the index value. So the nice part about this is basically I have this name, right? This key that I can deal with, and I have the value. So what I want to do is I want to create like a web page that's going to show me the GDP based off of size. So I can get the idea of how much bigger certain GDPs are than others. Anyways, the cool thing with this, again, you could pull this out of a database. So if somebody is doing like a query on a database, instead of having this dictionary here, you actually pull the values out of a database. So with open, we're going to be using the with open. With open, we're going to create a HTML page called visual.html. We're going to open it with W. W is overwrite. So either create or overwrite the document that's there as file. Then we're going to do file.write. So as I talked about before, so that should be there. As I talked about before, with Python, Python really cares about indentation and next lines in order to do code blocks. One of the problems you can run into, though, is when you're dealing with other languages, such as CSS, it can be a pain in the butt. So what you can do is you can wrap your CSS styling or your HTML or whatever in triple quotation marks. So either double or single. I would say single because Python. So you do single quotation mark, single quotation mark, single quotation mark, and basically anything inside this until you get to the end of the single quotation marks, basically Python isn't going to worry about. So we create style. So we have a style tag here. We close a style tag here. We're going to do div. We're going to do background color is green. Border radius is 50%. So we're going to create circles. Display inline block. So that means they're going to be side to side, side by side. And then align text is going to be centered. So we're going to have circles, and then the names of the countries are going to be inside centered. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for this class. Then for country, comma, amount in GDP.items. So basically, this is how you pull out both the key and the value. So a lot of times you'll see for key, comma, value. So these names can be whatever the hell you want them to be. X, Y, country amount, key value, Bob, Sue, doesn't matter as long as you call back to them properly and you know what the hell you're doing, right? So we have, GDP. So GDP is our dictionary. In order to get the key and the value, you do GDP.items. So this is a method that allows you to get both the key and the value. I do file.write from up there, since this is all still within that open. And this is one big ass line. Just so you understand, this is just what's called word wrap. So this isn't actually different lines. It's all just one damn line. Anyways, so with this, as you can see on your page, F, so you're going to do div style height colon the amount, right? So the amount is going to be, right, 150, 50, 125, 75. So the height of this thing is going to be that. The width is going to be the amount, right? So that's going to basically give you the size of the circle. 50% means a circle, so this will give us the size. And then inside, so we do the div style, height, width, pixels. And then we're going to close this, and then we're going to put the country name, the value of the country name. And then we're going to close the div, and then do a /n for next line. So this is ASCII text right here. This is for the ASCII if you go take a look at the source. Anyways, that'll be there. If we then run this, we can run that. I can then go to visual.html, and this will be written since we haven't done anything with our working directory. So the working directory is where you, by default, read files from or write files to. That is going to be your user's root directory. So you can see visual.html just got created. I double click on this. There we go. Again, it's ugly, but you get the point. Canada has a small circle. USA has a big circle. China has a slightly smaller circle. France has a medium-sized circle. And again, this actually should be responsive. So if I do this, you can see it squishes all around, right? And the cool part about this, again, being dynamic, is if I go, and it's like, that's not fair. Canada's better than everybody else. You know, if you do 350 there, and I refresh, and I do this, now we can see Canada is huge, and USA is obviously the smaller one, right? And so that can be like a useful thing, like, let's say you have a sales department for your company, right? So you have 10 different salespeople, and salespeople are all about being competitive, right? If you want your salespeople to work harder, you have to show them how badly they're failing, right? Because that's every sales department. I don't know what it is. You have like one person that's amazing, and everybody else is kind of crap. But they all kind of think that they're amazing, but they're not, right? So one of the things is like, so if every single sale gets put into your SQL database, and then every day, like you do reports for a day or month or whatever, and then you can visualize, this is how many sales Bob is doing. and this is how many cells, Tom is doing, that can be a useful way to motivate people. All right, really, really sink in how many things that they're not selling. All right. Anyways, that's one of the things that you can do. And so that will be that particular lab. Let's see here. Then the next lab, right? Next lab is the report lab. And so with the report lab, okay. Yep. So basically what this is for is this is basically using the student.csv file that we used before. So again, one of the big things as you start playing, especially with Python, you're going to need to get data from somewhere. Again, ChatGPT is great. You can simply ask it for data. I need a CSV file with a first name, a last name, an email address, and an allergy. And I need 1,000 records, and it will give it to you in about 30 seconds. Again, to be clear, I like ChatGPT, even if it's not AI. So anyways, we're using that student CSV file like we did before. And so one of the things we did before is we went and we searched through. So we showed only the records of somebody who had a particular allergy. So basically the idea here is, again, you need to be thinking about the user interface design. What if we want to show all the records, but we want to highlight, right, as somebody, a user that has a particular value. And so that is what this is going to be. Again, the CSV file, just so you see this, visual code. Again, this is all what a CSV file is. First name, last name, age, shirt size, and allergy. Right, this is the first line up here, so we're just going to be skipping this today. But again, we've got like 50 records or something. And so the question here is like, what if we want to know everybody who has a pollen allergy? Okay, so with open student.csv, we're going to open with read r as file. File is going to equal file.readlines. So the file comes in as an object. You can't really do anything as an object. What we're going to be then doing is making every line in that file a value in a list. So now this is going to be a list. With open report.html w. So this is where we're going to overwrite. So be careful. Be careful. This one we're gonna read. This one we're gonna overwrite. If you put read here, it's not gonna work, but it's not gonna be a disaster. If you put W here, it might be a disaster. Just keep it in mind. Again, as I say with most technology, you don't have to be smart. You do have to be precise. So with open report.html w, and so this will go to our root directory. That'll be right into our root directory as report. So we're going to use a different name here. Then we're going to do report.write table. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up a table tag. Then we're going to say for line in file. So this, right, this is the file that we're dealing with. So for each value, we're going to call it line. We're going to do file. We're going to start at index 1. So with lists and dictionary, they actually start at index 0. Index 0 is all that information, that title information we don't care about. So we're going to start at index 1. That's where the names actually start. So 1 colon starts at index 1, goes to the end. We're going to say record equals line. We're going to use the split method. So what the split method does is basically this comes in as a string. So this is a string. And then what we're going to say is whenever there's a comma, we want to turn this into a list, which each one of these as being a value in the index. So Gerald will be 0, Murphy will be 1, 57 will be 2, XS will be 3, and allergy will be 4. So this is where we then create a list from that line. If record 4, so we take a look at this, if record 4, again, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's the allergy. Let's see here. If record 4 dot strip. So what strip does is it strips away the white space. So again, whenever you're dealing with data, one of the issues is either when you're doing conditionals or anything else. Pollen with a white space at the end is not the same as pollen without a white space. So we're going to be stripping out any white space around that allergy. So if record minus any extra white space equals pollen, color is going to equal yellow, right? So again, that's where I talked about the inline CSS. Else, color is going to equal nothing. Report.write, so here we open the table. Here, we're going to do TR. So we talked about with HTML before. So TR is the table row, the whole row itself. So I'm going to say report.write, f string, TR style, background color equals whatever color. So either nothing or yellow. Then we're going to say for value in record. So again, record is now a list. So each value, report.write, f string, TD, value TD. So we open the table here, we open the table row here, we put each value here. Once we get out of this for loop, we then close the table row. And then once we break out of all of this, we then close the table. And so now we get a dynamic table that gets created. If I run this, it'll run. I can go to report.html. And so now this is what it gives us. So these are all the records in that CSV file. And again, if I'm looking for pollen, it'll show me Lee pollen, Harold pollen, and Nancy is pollen, and Joseph is pollen, and the whole 9 yards. Right? I can go back, and hopefully this won't screw up on me. Please, mommy, please have this work. I can do soy, hopefully. I can go back to report.html. I can open it. Oh, thank God. We can see Adam is soy, Matthew is soy, Joseph is soy, Thomas is soy, and the whole 9 yards. And again, this might be something like if you have a kids club or anything like that, and you need to give the teachers or the instructors like the attendance list. Basically, this is a list of all your students. But then on that list, you want to visually have something pop out so that they know, oh, that's what I have to think about. So you could have so we did the if-else statement. So we could do an if, elif, elif, elif. So if equals pollen, make it yellow. Elif equals soy, make it red. Elif equals peanut, purple. Right? And so again, so your instructor, whether they print it out on a piece of paper and it's in color, or they have a screen, they can have all those students, plus they have those visual signifiers so they can try to understand what's going on. So that's what the second lab is. And then the third lab. Where's the third lab? Dynamic site. So this is simple. Basically, the idea here is that you're going to be dynamically building a web page using variable values. So this is basically how too many acronyms. This is basically how CMSs work. So WordPress, you probably know, Drupal, Joomla, whole bunch of other ones, right? Basically, all the information is sitting in a database, and then when you go to a web page, that web page is dynamically written by the backend script, PHP with WordPress, in order to give you the website that you're looking at. So this is just an idiotically simple way of doing that. So we're going to have a header. So header is going to equal hello world at the top. We're going to have column 1, again, kind of like I showed you here. This is kind of what it's going to look like. You're going to have headers, you're going to have columns, then you're going to have a footer. So column 1, this is a cool site. Column 2, we hope you think this is a really cool site. Column 3, please tell us you think we are, how cool you think we are. And then footer, you can contact us at bob@reallycoolsite.com. We come here to create the style. Style div. Display flex, justify content center, so it's going to put the content in center. Div header, so we're going to create a header. Background color is going to be orange. Font size is going to be 100 pixels. Text align is going to equal center. Display is just going to be a block, because it's just going to be what's there. Oops. Let's see here. Div column, height equals auto. Width equals 200 pixels. So with this, the idea is the width will be static at 200 pixels, but maybe it'll get taller if there's more information there. Display inline block. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3. And that's just going to be the column. And then we're going to have a footer. We're also going to have the background color be orange. Font size is going to be 25 pixels. Text align is going to be center. Display is going to be block again. We're going to close the style. Yeah, I'm going to close the style. Okay, so with open site.html, W for overwrite as file, file.write f string. So we're going to put style, right? So style is all the styling. So this is a variable value. So we're going to put all of that here. Then we're going to do div class header. So we're going to say div class equals header. And then we're going to put the header value. Then we're going to create a div. So again, these divs are inside a div. So we're going to create a div. Inside the div will be div class column, whatever the value is for column 1, div class column, value for column 2, div class column, value for column 3. We close the div. Then we create div class footer. We put the footer information in. We close the div. Then we close the three quotation marks. We close that. We close the parentheses. And then basically then we hit run. That just runs. We now have site.html. And yay! We have a pretty dynamically built website, right? Hello world, whatever I said, it was like 100 pixels. There's an orange background. The text is centered. We have this column, says this is a really cool site. And this column says we hope you think this is a really cool site. And this column, we hope you think the site is really cool too. Anyways, and then we have a footer here, and that's where you put your footer information. And so basically, this is kind of showing you how to be able to build that dynamic website simply, again, using CSS and Python and all that kind of stuff. And that is the class. That is the class. If people are sticking around, I am willing to stick around for about 30 minutes if you guys need some help with doing these labs. If you don't want to do the labs, feel free to go home. It is 8:30, so I won't mind. But I am more than happy to stick around. Does anybody have any questions? Make sure to use the actual Christ. Use the raise hand thing so I know.
Thanks, Eli. Have a good night.
Yep. See ya.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely enjoyed the lecture.
Yeah. Good. I'm also really not sure how people are unmuting themselves. You're not supposed to be unmuting yourselves. Oh, well. Okay, still got 8 folks, or like 6 folks or whatever. Any questions there? You guys just gonna be typing along? I guess there's a chat stream. Let's see here. 12 new messages. Thank you very much. Love the lecture. CSS is one of my favorite things to do. You're a sick person. I'm surprised how many people like literally hate CSS. I was doing a CSS class back when I was doing the things in person, and I was talking to like other tech professionals just to, I don't know, get their read on CSS, because there's also Tailwind. We're not doing tail. Anyways, there's all kinds of stuff out now. There's Tailwind, and there's XHTML, HTMLX. Anyways, there's some stuff. What I was surprised about is how many people truly hate CSS with a passion. So if you like it, good for you. You are one of the few. That's good. Thanks. Cool deal. Thanks again. I'll do my homework tomorrow. Gotta go to bed. Good deal. Same as 3:30. Oh, that's late. I'll start on the lab, but we'll follow after daybreak. Cool. Good deal. Brazil. Cool. Oh, that's the amazing thing about the modern world. You'd be sitting in the middle of Asheville talking to somebody in Brazil. It is great to meet you, Eli. Look forward to the next lecture for more understanding. Have a great night. Okay, Renato. You're the last one left, so I hate to say, I think I'm gonna go to bed now. Yeah, cool. Yeah, since you're the last one left, yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. I have my LinkedIn accounts all over the place. And yeah, I will call it an evening. So see you later, man.